I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 71 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. A quick note before we begin. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to the interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all the participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of the interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the same microphone that their headset is plugged into, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table, away from the microphone when they are not in use. Today, we are beginning our study of the exploitation scheme targeting certain international students. I would like to welcome Mr. Honorable John Fraser, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thanks a lot, Minister, for appearing before the committee. He is also joined by two senior officials from the department, Madame Christine Fox, Deputy Minister, welcome, and also Madame Michelle Kingsley, Assistant Deputy Minister, Operations. Minister will be with us for the first hour, and the officials will stay for the second hour to answer the questions. Minister, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will go into round of questioning. Floor is yours. You can please begin.
Thank you very much. Look, just before we get started, I know we were a little bit delayed with votes. If you guys will have me for the full hour, I won't change you on the agreed upon time, and I'm happy to stay and make good on the commitment that we've made to be with you for the first hour. In addition, I'd like to start by saying thank you. There's a number of you who've reached out to me personally over the course of the last number of days, weeks, and months on the very specific issue of the international students who were facing potential removals as a result of being admitted on the basis of inauthentic documents. And for those of you who have been good advocates, I want to say thank you for the many conversations that we've shared. Look, I appreciate, as always, the invitation to appear and address some of the concerns around these reports of international students and graduates who are facing removal from Canada after these letters of acceptance were submitted as part of their study permit application and were determined to be fraudulent. I understand that this situation is extremely distressing for a number of the students who are engaged, and I want to assure them and members of this committee and anyone else who might be monitoring this situation that the well-being of students who are genuine applicants to come and study in Canada is paramount for me and for the government. The fact of the matter is that many of the international students in this cohort of individuals came sincerely to Canada with an intent to study and to pursue an education at world-class institutions that we offer here in Canada. And frankly, some of them were duped by bad actors who claimed to be helping them in their immigration application process. There are other foreign nationals who we believe had no intent of pursuing higher education in Canada and used the fraudulent acceptance letters to take advantage of Canada's immigration system. Within this cohort of individuals, some have been engaged in potentially criminal behavior, and there are potentially individuals who knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that they were taking advantage of the system and knew that it was wrong and did it anyway. Because there are those who we believe were genuine in their application to come and study in Canada and those who are not, we've made a decision to establish a task force. IRCC is going to be working closely with Canada Border Services agencies to identify the victims of fraud. Further, we've directed the officials at IRCC to approach every incident on a case-by-case basis and to do so with expediency, flexibility, and compassion where it's warranted. We need to deploy the necessary tools so that those who are or were genuine students who wish to come study in Canada can remain in Canada and not face additional barriers on their next step of their Canadian journey. I want to be clear about this. Students who came here to study and did study will not face deportation. The Immigration Refugee Protection Act provides me as Minister with discretionary authority, which I believe should be exercised in the present context. Therefore, if the facts of an individual case are clear that an international student came to Canada with a genuine intent to study and without knowledge of the use of fraudulent documentation or participation in criminal activity, we've provided instructions to officers to issue temporary residence permits to those individuals to allow them to remain in Canada. This is going to ensure that these well-intentioned students and graduates can remain in the country. We're also going to make sure that they are not subjected to the 5-year ban from re-entering Canada that would normally follow a case of misrepresentation. While this process runs its course, preliminary temporary residence permits will be issued if they are required in order to prevent deportations that had previously been ordered. IRCC travaille avec ses partenaires locaux et
IRCC is working with its local and international partners to detect and deter fraud. We're continuously improving the systems to detect evidence of fraud. When fraud tips are reported, IRCC will always continue to look into each one. To uphold our system, a full review of the International Student Program is underway. The review aims to strengthen program integrity and enhance protection to address student vulnerability, unethical recruitment, and unscrupulous actors.
And on the recommendation from a study done by this very committee back in 2017, we've regulated consultants in Canada who must be licensed under the College of Immigration Consultants. And we've invested to improve oversight, strengthen enforcement, and increase accountability. Mon ministère mène également des campagnes.
IRCC also runs media campaigns, both at home and abroad, to deter fraud and help people so they avoid becoming victims. As recently as March 2023, IRCC ran a campaign in India targeting potential visitors, students, and workers to decrease the misuse of permits and to reduce fraud.
In citizenship, it's my responsibility to protect the integrity of our immigration system and ensure that it upholds legitimate cases, that it supports the victims of fraud, but pays no comfort to the perpetrators of such fraud. Madam Chair, I know that there's students who are watching the proceedings today, and I want to make sure that this message is communicated clearly. I'm committed, unreservedly, to finding a way to support them and ensure that they can remain in Canada with a valid legal status if they had a genuine intent to study and did not have knowledge that they were benefiting from fraudulent documentation. At the same time, I think we all need to agree and understand that those who were complicit in the use of fraud to abuse Canada's immigration system will be held to account for their actions. Canada is always going to be a welcoming land of opportunity for people from around the world, including those who want to come, study in Canada, work in Canada, and become upstanding members of our communities. But make no mistake, we have no room to tolerate people who attempt to cheat our system, and we absolutely have no intention of giving special treatment to those who commit fraud. We can protect the integrity of the system and demonstrate compassion to the innocent at the same time. Merci. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to take what questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. We will now go to our first round, and we will start with Mr. Uppal. Mr. Uppal, you will have 6 minutes for your round of questioning. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will actually be splitting my time with Member of Parliament Hudlin. Thank you, Minister. You say today that the victims of this scheme, the fraud that will not be deported, and I'm sure those victims, those students, are pleased to hear that. But this whole situation we've known for months now. We've heard about this for months. People in the community on YouTube and other media outlets had known back since maybe last year in September. CBC picked up this news story earlier this year, and all of these students that have had deportation issued against them, because the department realized their mistake. Their mistake was that they accepted these fake letters and issued valid visas to Canada for them to come here. Now, since then, those students have gone to school. They've been studying. Some of them started working. Some of them started a family here, got married, have children. They've essentially set up roots here in Canada because this happened over several years. And then when the department realized their mistake, they issued deportation orders, essentially a shoot first, ask questions later situation, and it left the students with significant mental health issues because of the stress of that, and financial as well, because not only did they already pay for their student fees and everything else it takes to get to Canada, but now they're paying immigration lawyers and others again to be able to fight to stay here when they were the victims of this whole scheme. And now, like I said, we've known this for months. Conservatives have raised this issue in the House of Commons. Our leader, Pierre Poilievre, had questions in the House of Commons about this issue. In this committee, we've had at least 3 to 4 times a motion that was presented to study this issue, and unfortunately, Liberals and NDP rejected that motion. So, Minister, you've had the power to do what you're saying today the whole time. You had that power. Why didn't you do this before?
Madam Chair, how much time do I have to answer that question? I had a number of elements. And I'd like to address each of them.
4 minutes left.
4 minutes?
Yeah, 4 minutes for
he's
Mr. Uppal,
sharing
yeah.
his time.
Yeah. 4.
Okay, first of all, Mr. Uppal, thank you. I always view you to be a reasonable parliamentarian, and I have a lot of respect for you as well, and I enjoy our conversations. The reality is I became of this issue around the beginning of spring, not at the end of last year. And when I first became aware of it, it was a result of media reports that claimed that there were 700 international students who were impacted by this. I wanted to verify the veracity of that reporting. It turns out that that was not an accurate reflection of what was going on. It's really, really important when we're dealing with something as serious as a person's ability to remain in Canada that we know the facts that we're dealing with. So we undertook a bit of work to understand what was actually going on. What we had determined, and I would differ respectfully with your assessment of a shoot first, ask questions later process, we're dealing with a cohort of people who've been referred to the IRB from CBSA, and there are now 57 individuals who have been subjected to a removal order. Understanding what was going on after this process has played out when people had an opportunity to adduce evidence was very important. To the extent that I could communicate we were working on a solution for people who were in fact genuine students, we tried to communicate online to demonstrate that we were working towards a solution. But to identify the right solution sometimes takes longer than people would like, including me on many occasions. But the reality is I'm not just looking at the need to demonstrate compassion to those who I think should remain in Canada. We absolutely need to demonstrate compassion to those people who should remain in Canada. But we also need to protect the integrity of the system. When we're dealing with a widespread, potentially criminal element to people who are seeking to abuse Canada's immigration system, I start to think about the reputational risk to the international student program more broadly. This is an extraordinary program that brings people to our country who make an incredible difference. Yes, we need to do what we can to protect the mental health and well-being of people who are going through this process, but we can't cut corners when it comes to developing a process that will ensure we protect the integrity of the system at the same time.
Minister, didn't you essentially treat everybody as a criminal first and then start a process later, right? Everybody was issued the deportation orders, so everyone's treated the same as a criminal, and then you took this step, when you could have actually taken this step at the beginning when you first heard of this problem.
No. With enormous respect, suggesting people were treated as criminals is a false characterization of
they were
what
being
has gone
deported.
So
they had to go
look,
get
let me
lawyers.
explain, though. The only people that we're dealing with who face a removal order have actually had an opportunity to present a case to the IRB, but we have a shortcoming in this instance, and that shortcoming is tied to the fact that there are individuals who didn't know that they were taken advantage of, but the rigidity of the existing rules would have resulted in their removal. That's why we've introduced this new process, for that narrow cohort of people who have been subjected to a removal order that we believe demonstrate that there was no intent to abuse the system, but instead should remain in Canada. So this is a tailored solution that was developed after the existing process has run its course, and we expect there will be a few more people who have to go through this process. So I think we've been able to develop it in a way that will both protect the integrity of the system and demonstrate compassion to those who certainly deserve it.
Do you know if anyone has been deported through this process? Has anyone been?
There have been some individuals who've been deported. It's not a large number. I believe there are 8 people who have been deported. Those people, should they wish to take part in the process, will have the access to the same program that we have now put forward.
Will they be able to come back?
If they demonstrate that their intent to come to Canada was genuine and that they were not complicit in fraud,
and the
they'll
people
be
that
able,
are here that are currently while you're doing this investigation, will they be able to get work permits? Will they be able to continue their studies? What is the process for that?
Madam Chair, will you allow me the latitude? And if I can stick around for 30
Your
seconds
time is
extra?
up.
Perhaps when your colleague picks up, I can begin by answering your question.
Thank you, Minister. We will now go to MPLE. MPLE, you will have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the Minister for appearing on such a short notice on this important topic. Through you, Madam Chair, Minister, I have been contacted by quite a few constituents and several stakeholders who are concerned about the situation of these international students who are facing the possibility of deportation. First, I wonder if the Minister could provide us with some idea of the numbers of students who are affected by this situation.
Yes. So the number of students, there is, I believe, 82 people that were referred to the IRB process. And of the 82, there are about 25 who are still going through the process, and there are the balance would be 57 people who've actually been subjected to a removal order. Clearly different than the initially reported 700. There may be additional cases who come through in the future, but as it stands now, there are 82 people who were referred by CBSA to the IRB, and 57 who've been subjected to removal orders as a result.
Thank you. Again, through you, Madam Chair, there needs to be a fact-finding process to distinguish between those genuine students who had no knowledge of the fraud committed by the consultant and those who were complicit in that fraud. The minister has set up a task force of IRCC officials to work with CBSA for that purpose. Can the minister provide us with more information about the fact-finding process and elaborate on what is meant in today's statement by the word, if the facts are clear?
Certainly. Thank you for this. So the process will work roughly as follows, and I'll perhaps try to answer Mr. Appel's question as part of my response. The task force is going to have senior officials from IRCC and CBSA. CBSA is going to refer the individuals who are implicated to IRCC. We will investigate on the basis of the totality of the evidence, including whether a person in fact did come and study, whether they complied with the terms of the permit that they thought they were legitimately issued, and we will look at other factors that a student may be able to adduce. If the determination at the end of that process is that the person did not have knowledge of the fraudulent documentation that allowed them to enter Canada, and they intended to study genuinely, they'll be permitted to remain in Canada. They'll be issued a temporary residency permit and will be able to continue to work or study as the case may be until they come up on the next step in their immigration journey in Canada, at which point we will be able to use humanitarian and compassionate grounds to make sure that their application is not prejudiced should they fall into the cohort of people who we believe were not complicit in fraud and instead were taken advantage of by fraudsters. At the end of the day, the goal here is to make sure that the immigration journey for the innocent actors is not interrupted by this dramatically unfortunate episode. But we need to have the fact-finding process to determine whether somebody who came to Canada on a study permit with no intent to study actually should be able to face the consequences, particularly where they knew about the fraud that allowed them to enter Canada and decided to move forward with those applications anyway.
Thank you. It seems to me that threat of deportation is a kind of blunt instrument in this situation and is really counterproductive. These are young people who grew up in another country halfway around the world and are used to following adult guidance with respect to their studies. Most of them have come here and studied at approved institutions of higher learning. Can the minister assure us that this discretionary authority will be used to prevent deportation of any of those students until the department completes its fact findings?
Yes, I can confirm that's the case, and I should just, for fullness of the explanation of the process, before we even get into the territory where we need to concern ourselves with deportations, the ordinary process through which a person can make their case at the IRB will apply. The need for the task force process we shared details of today only arises after a negative decision is rendered at the IRB. So a person will go through the ordinary process, but if they are found inadmissible by the IRB, we will immediately issue a temporary residence permit that will allow for the duration of the investigation to be completed, and the deportation will not be acted upon until there is a final determination of the task force about the nature of a person's knowledge of fraud and their genuine intent to study.
Okay, thank you for clarity. Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
55 seconds.
Minister, I know you've been listening and working hard on this issue with the genuine intent. And I know the opposition party is exploiting this situation of that innocent students who are victim of fraud. And you have made it clear that those students would not be deported until they have gone through this process. you want to add anything more to make it more clear to those students who are in this limbo?
Look, I don't want to attribute motivations to any people or one party or another. My experience has been that there have been good advocacy from members of parliament from different parties. You have been a stalwart advocate, Shafkat in particular. There are others sitting in this room. I look down, everybody has spoken to me about this. Tom and Brad have both reached out to me before. We've had Alexei and some of his bloc colleagues discuss the issue. Jenny has been discussing this with me, and in fact we had the chance to meet to discuss the issue as well.
Minister, time is up.
The reality is we're listening to the feedback, regardless of where it comes from, and trying to advance solutions that meet the needs of communities based on the feedback we've taken.
Thank you, Minister. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't agree with my colleague, Mr. Ali. On the contrary, I'd like to congratulate the opposition members that raised the issue, people from all the parties, and I'd like to highlight the work of the media. They've raised this in the public sphere, and also the management of the situation by the minister, and I would like to thank him for appearing here today. I think that we are on the correct road now with regards to people who were targeted in this situation. What interests me is the global reach. How did we get here, and how can we make sure that this won't happen again? There must be mechanisms that will avoid these types of situations. So my questions are going to be about what happened, but also what we can do and what's not working right now in order to avoid this in the future. Most students who made a request for resident status, they did this by going through a consultant firm. Was IRCC aware of this firm before the situation happened?
So I can speak for myself. I was not personally aware of this particular individual. I am acutely aware of the fact that there are consultants around the world who abuse the system that we have to protect against. But perhaps to our officials, was there an awareness amongst the department of this particular individual?
Est-ce qu'on connaissait le cabinet en question?
On avait
Not the firm. But I would like to say that there were refusals. We refused 976 applications generated by the same consultant. So there were already issues, yes. So to say that one is an immigration consultant, you have to be a member of the Immigration Consultants College. So this organization provides permits to consultant firms, is that correct? In Canada, yes. Yes, in Canada. Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
For the interpreters, so please.
Excusez-moi, je suis désolé.
Okay, my apologies sincerely to the interpreters. For people who are registered consultants in Canada, the same is not true for third parties in other countries.
Parfait. Donc,
Perfect. So it's illegal to say that you're a registered consultant and provide services in Canada if you're not qualified to do it according to the law, correct?
Actually be sanctioned by the College of Immigration Consultants if you falsely represent
est-ce
yourself.
que vous ne croyez pas que les conseillers d'immigration qui s'occupent
Don't you think that the consultants, don't you think they should be submitted to checks on behalf of IRCC or the College of isn't it contradictory, in other words, Mr. Minister, isn't it contradictory to have regulations around the registered consultant job in Canada, but not to do necessary checks with firms outside of Canada? Right now, there's no mechanism that allows for this by IRCC or Global Affairs.
This is we're dealing with the reality of the situation here. I think if we could extraterritorial apply some of the regulations to prevent fraud, we would love to. But we need to do that in partnership with other countries. And we work with other countries on a diplomatic level to increase migration protection. As a matter of course, we share information. I mentioned during my remarks some of the work that we've been doing in India as recently as March of this year. But the reality is having Canadian officials enforce Canadian laws in other countries around the world is not a simple thing to do. And we need to work with partners who have the jurisdiction to implement laws that they authorize within their own areas of jurisdiction.
Mais c'est
Yes, but this has been my point since the beginning, and this is where I'm trying to bring us. If we're able to sign agreements, free trade agreements with Europe, with the U.S., Mexico, Asia Pacific, we should be able to have economic agreements, large scale, complicated agreements, but we're not able to have bilateral discussions with large conglomerations of countries to avoid this type of situation that we find ourselves in today. And the start point of this entire issue is exactly that. And it's not your fault, I understand. The situation today allows us to reflect and have serious discussions because if you've been following, there will be more and more people who will want to come to Canada and Quebec. And if we don't have this type of mechanism in place, how are we going to avoid this? This is a very interesting point. In a perfect world, it's a great idea. However, as you know full well,
where we try to regulate globally in industry, the bad actors will still try to operate outside of that system. Despite what progress we may be able to achieve to align the standards of protection, there will always be people who seek to abuse Canada's immigration system. If there are new ideas the committee wants to put forward or study about how we can cooperate with partners on the international stage to better protect our system, I would welcome recommendations from the committee.
But Mr. Minister, unfortunately, in Quebec the Bloc Québécois will never be in power. So it's up to you as immigration minister to ask your Minister of Foreign Affairs to have these types of discussions. What we're seeing today has been a tragedy for some students. Some were deported to their countries. They're going to have to demonstrate that they should not have been deported and have mental health issues. This is your job. My job is to tell you what to do it.
Is that the complete time, Madam Chair?
You can quickly answer the question.
Look, we work across portfolios and directly with our counterparts in immigration in other countries as well to work to foster a culture of integrity when it comes to our mutual immigration systems. But this is an area where I think Canada and the rest of the world can continue to improve. If there are solutions you or other members of the committee or the committee collectively wish to put forward, I would welcome your suggestions with open arms.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Brunel de Sepp. We will now go to Ms. Kwan for 6 minutes. Ms. Kwan.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the officials for coming to our committee today. And I also want to extend a thank you to the Minister for taking time to meet with me specifically on this issue. I know that there are lots of issues on the Minister's plate, but I appreciate him taking the time to meet with me, particularly to try and find ways to ensure that the students who are victims of fraud are not going to be penalized and punished, and to look for further actions to make them whole, so to speak. With respect to the announcement that the Minister made, I'd like to just get a clarification on the issue around the inadmissibility based on misrepresentation. The Minister just said just now to say that the students who are victims would not be subjected to the 5-year ban. Could the Minister clarify if that would mean that the record of inadmissibility based on misrepresentation will be erased then from their file?
The best mechanism that we've been able to identify to overcome the 5-year inadmissibility ban is to give, in the interim period, while a person is currently on a study permit or an existing work permit, a temporary residency permit that aligns with the remaining time on that document. At the next stage in their immigration journey, whether it's applying for a postgraduate work permit, applying for permanent residency, or whatever the next step in that process may be, we intend to apply humanitarian and compassionate grounds to overcome the inadmissibility barrier so it doesn't jeopardize that student's opportunity or graduate's opportunity to continue along their immigration journey. The reason that we've chosen that is a function of the legislative requirements that are in place today, so we can use existing tools rather than reforming the legislation to avoid a person's immigration journey being interrupted as a result of the fraud which they were not part of.
So that means that it would stay on their record, it would not be erased, but the Minister is saying that there would be a note to say that this will not be prejudiced for their future applications. Am I understanding that correctly?
More specifically for humanitarian and compassionate reasons, which is an existing exemption under the legislation, but you've more or less identified the correct process.
Okay, I hope that when it comes to that for those students, it would actually really work that way, because what I worried about is that when you have that bad record, so to speak, that dark mark next to your name, sometimes a official who's processing the application will still say, hey, you know what, there's misrepresentation on the record. So I want to flag that as as a concern, because we obviously would not want to have a second chapter to this issue down the road. Now, there are students who are in a situation where they have been issued a removal order and they have filed to the federal court but not yet have had the hearing, for example. They're waiting. There are those who have filed and who's been rejected, as an example. There are those who have made an application to have their, let's say, work permit extended and they're now out of status, but waiting to see what's going to happen to them. Is the minister saying now with this new task force that those individuals should not worry about all of those outcomes, and then that their case will be assessed under the new task force?
I want to be, look, my background in law before politics is telling me be very careful, because the facts of individual cases may vary, and I don't want to describe in a blanket way that may not capture nuance. But the new process we've shared with the task force today will be triggered immediately upon an inadmissibility finding at the IRB. You don't need to go through the existing federal court challenge to an IRB decision in order to benefit from the process we've laid out before the task force. I want to be careful not to provide legal advice to people who might be in the middle of a federal court hearing. There may be very good reasons why a person chooses to proceed down that path in any event, but for an individual who is not yet at that stage and is going through the IRB process, if they receive a negative decision at the end of that process, they will immediately have access to the steps outlined as part of the task force we described today.
So if they have not yet received a negative decision, I'm asking because I've met with the students. I went to Brampton. I met with the students. I've been on Zooms with them. They've called me. Many of them have sent me piles and piles of documentations regarding the case. I'm putting them all together to submit to the minister's office and to the public safety minister's office for consideration. And some of them are caught out in this situation. They're like saying, so now in the face of this, they're waiting for a CBSA appointment because they've been told they've received their removal order. They're waiting for a CBSA appointment. Should they proceed with that process? As an example, I assume that when they get a date, they should show up and present their documents and accordingly. But there are others who have filed for federal court, but they have not yet received a date for federal court. What should they do? The reason why I ask is this. It's really important because it's really expensive for people to go through that process. And I know that the minister, in your comments, you recognize that as well. So the question that students are asking is this: should we not proceed with that and save some legal fees and then go through this other task force process that the minister has set out?
One of the challenges that we run into when we're dealing with the existing legislative framework is that just simply dealing with this process when there could be, the legislation would still have them go through the IRB process and could result in an inadmissibility, would put us in a situation where we might extend temporarily a person's status who would then subsequently be found inadmissible and would still need to go through a similar process to have access to the humanitarian and compassionate grounds to avoid the 5-year inadmissibility. The individual circumstances, I want to be very careful not to provide legal advice, but the person who's going through the process should always show up when they're asked by CBSA to show up. They should go through with the IRB process and make their case. It is only the cohort of people who complete that process, who are deemed inadmissible at the end of that process, that will then require the benefit of the new process that we've created today. I understand that these are many layers of process, but we want to make sure for every individual who is caught up and doesn't have the compassion given to them that I think the facts deserve, still have that last shot through the task force that we've announced earlier today.
Thank you. Time is up, Ms. Kwan, for you.
And of course, Madam Chair, if I can say, for anybody who wishes clarity in process after this meeting, we would be pleased to meet, whether it's with officials, to describe technically the process, and we want to be as clear as we possibly can to the extent there are unanswered questions at the end of today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We will now proceed to Mr. Hallen for 5 minutes. Mr. Hallen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, you today had said that you found out in early spring about the deportations, and that's about the same time as when the CBC article came out. Also, you tweeted out at the end of May, and after visiting the students along with our leader, like many of my colleagues. The first question that comes to mind to them and us is, what took you so long? What happened between March and May?
Well, as I explained to Mr. Uppel during his questioning, we needed to verify the accuracy of the reports. In fact, I did interviews with certain community media outlets in the days after becoming aware, because we had no indication, for example, there were 700 people
What's the department
impacted.
doing between that time, though?
Sorry, could you repeat
What were
that?
the steps the department was taking in between that time? Not what you did with the media.
Certainly. So when we connected with CBSA, after we became aware of the media reports.
This was in March?
This would have been probably in the second half of March this process would have started. And look, we can, after I give it maybe a description, I'm happy to, for a more technical answer to share with officials. But we sought to identify how many people were impacted. We had no indication that there were 700 people, and we wanted to dig in to figure out why the discrepancy. I still don't know where the 700 figure came from. After we started looking at the number of scenarios, we came to understand there was a significant number of applications that were tied to a very similar pattern. Nearly 1,000, in fact, had been refused entry on the basis of fraudulent letters of acceptance. The remaining, there was a few hundred others that actually were admitted, some of whom were genuine students who intended to study. And of that cohort, CBSA has so far referred 87 to the IRB, and then rather 82. A remaining 57 have actually gone through that process. So it's largely been understanding what is the situation that these students are dealing with, what is the pattern underlying the issuance of fraudulent acceptance letters that led to them being admitted to Canada, and then developing the process to allow them to come through Canada and remain here legally.
It was a 2-month process that led to that. Is that what you're saying? Before you tweeted out?
It would have, look, I don't know the exact number of date. It would have been a couple of, probably a couple of months to understand the fact pattern and develop
the reason why I
the
say
shape
it's
of the program.
important is because today you're saying that 8 have been deported, and in your press conference today, you had mentioned that many had left voluntarily.
Not many, 10 people.
So 10 people have left voluntarily. It's still 10 people whose families are affected by this, on top of the other 8.
So just to be clear,
but let me just get to my question.
Well, there's just one inaccuracy, and if I need to extend by 20 seconds, people who left voluntarily are not inadmissible to Canada. They did not complete the IRB process. They've not been found to be deported.
Because they were given that letter, it was almost like you are a criminal. You got to leave.
And those
voluntarily means that they were given something by your department in order for them to leave their life here, where they built all those roots, and leave. The reason why I'm saying this is because it took you 2 months. It took 2 months to get to that point. That's 18 different families that you've already identified that could have been saved earlier, that could have stayed here and not spent that much money, and that had to either that got deported or voluntarily left. That's why I'm saying that it took you 2 months to send out a tweet that maybe we'll work on this. So I just want you to know that the impact that had on you not making any action for those 2 months. And it's interesting because the tweet came out the day after the Conservatives had written a public letter to you. So I just want to know, why would it have taken so long for you to even just respond to that?
So I had spoken publicly before the tweet you're referring to in May about the action that we were looking at taking. But as I mentioned in my response to Mr. Uppel's questions, there is serious potential criminality that's underlying a scheme that has led to people being admitted, and we need to watch very carefully. We need to investigate when we see a pattern of hundreds or potentially in excess of 1,000 applications that were made on the basis of fraudulent documents to make sure that we are protecting the integrity of the system and not compromising investigations into how these fraud rings can come to exist in the first place. With enormous respect, as you know I have for you, given our conversations before, sometimes when you're developing new programs that are designed to allow a person to come to and remain in Canada and overcome investigations of fraud, it can take a matter of weeks to do this. This is not something that was years in the making. We moved quickly to identify the problem.
That since you became the minister, there was never a pattern that your department picked up on, or that you might have picked up on, or any colleges that came to you? Were there any indications from anyone about any kind of pattern, including anyone coming to you to say this was happening?
We know there are widespread attempts to defraud Canada's immigration system.
When did you find that out, and what did you do?
Mr. Allen, your time is up.
Madam Chair, with the indulgence of the committee,
give a quick
10-second answer?
Yeah, please.
Upon being appointed minister during my early briefings, I became aware that there is widespread attempts by bad actors to defraud Canada's immigration system. We have entire branches of the department that seek to investigate these fraudulent activities every single day. With
Can you
these specific
table
bad
how many
actors,
have
Madam
been
Chair, I
caught
think I have the
For
floor. I'm trying. I don't want to
Time is
hurt
up.
the interpreter's
Something-
ears.
Mr. Hallen, if let him finish because your time is
Can you
up.
table that? How many have been caught since
Miss-
that time, since you've been minister?
Sorry, it's
Any rings or anything like that?
Madam Chair, I'm having a hard time just hearing the member. I think. Can
is up.
you direct me as you would?
Yes,
Okay.
time is up, so maybe if we get into another round, then we will get the opportunity. We will now go to Mr. Dhaliwal for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, first of all, I want to thank the Honourable Minister and his Parliamentary Secretary. Any time been to you or your staff, you always been welcoming and, of course, very patient to listen and always assuring that you will come up with a policy that will be good for the victims. And I want to thank you on that. And I received a call today. One of the family members of one of the victims said that this is exactly they were looking for, but you have announced today. And going from there onwards, you said that you're going to go case by case. You're not going to have a blanket policy. Would you be able to tell us what would be the consequences of implementing a blanket policy instead of looking at individual cases?
I believe the consequences of taking a blanket approach in this instance would be very negative and of a severe scale. In both the short term and in the long term for Canada's national interest. In the short term, we would be rewarding people who've committed fraud against the state. That is a bad idea. It's a bad idea because it's clearly contrary to the rules that we have in place, but it's also a bad idea because it creates a culture where bad actors around the world would see a demonstrated inability for a country to manage its own affairs successfully and seek to further defraud them going forward. Moreover, there are many people who are seeking to come to Canada that want to follow the rules. To send a signal that we're going to prefer people who've committed fraud and broken the rules over those who are following the processes that we have set out in law and regulations would be a disaster. What I think we've done is strike the right balance to acknowledge that the existing process didn't provide an opportunity for certain individuals, potentially a few dozen individuals, who were innocent, who sought to come here genuinely, and who were victimized by fraudsters. We're going to be able to demonstrate that compassion towards them. But at the same time, Canadians need to know that we're going to crack down on fraud in the system. I think one of the reasons that Canadians support ambitious immigration policy is because they trust the process through which people come to Canada. That includes security screening, it includes ensuring that we police fraud, and it ensures that we set people up for success when they arrive. The path forward, I think, achieves those dual goals of demonstrating compassion to those who deserve it. At the same time, we don't reward fraudsters for bad behavior.
Minister, one of the 57 came to my office. I'm not going to, express his or her identity. In fact, when I looked at this person's resume, went to Langara College, did diploma with over 80% marks in his studies. Is working for the last 5 years with one employer. In fact, his or her employer has also contacted me and given a good feedback for that particular person. So people like that who are facing deportation, you said that the deportation will stop. Can you give a timeline? When will this action come into effect?
Look, as soon as possible, although there are some people who have not yet gone through the IRB process. So for them, the process will begin immediately after they complete the IRB process. What we envision is an interim temporary residence permit that will be in the ballpark of a number of weeks that will allow them, say, for example, 8 weeks, for them to be able to complete the investigation. The sole purpose of that temporary residence permit is to allow us to complete the examination of their file. We want to move as quickly as we can to provide a fair resolution, but also a fast resolution. I know from you, Suk, and others, the stress on students has been enormous. We don't want this to drag out for months. We want to give them a platform to demonstrate their case, and if in fact they can confirm that they were a genuine applicant, we want to provide a remedy as quickly as possible, recognizing the mental health and financial burden many students have undertaken.
So you have given the assurance time and time again to those that are victims. You want to say something that you haven't said to those students, the action they should take on their part?
Look, my advice to anyone who's dealing with IRCC or CBSA is you should always show up for your appointments. You should always respect the communications that you receive. You should also know that we're trying to come at this issue from a place of compassion. There are extraordinary students around the world who want to come and study in Canada. They make immense economic and social contributions to our communities. The people that you're describing meet the profile of so many international students I've met, people who do well in school, who want to contribute to our communities, and our workforce in the future is going to rely on people like this. Our desire is to provide a quick remedy for them to allow them to remain in Canada and have certainty that this unfortunate and fraudulent episode will not impact their immigration journey to our country. But at the same time, for those who have committed fraud, we need to enforce the rules and demonstrate there will be consequences for criminal activity or fraudulent behavior.
Thank you for your leadership, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Daliba. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Brunel Desep.
Si, Madame la
Thank you. Mr. Minister, in 2022, something similar happened in Quebec. It was once again Indian students that were victims of fraud. I don't know if you were made aware of that situation. These were students who were refused a study permit by IRCC to study in private colleges in Quebec. But they had already paid their tuition, and those students were not reimbursed because the private colleges were under the protection of the Act. And once again, Indian students were victims of fraud, and I could send you media articles referring to that. And now what we see is that it's quite specific. There's some specific issue in India. You asked if we had suggestions. Well, you know, I always have proposals to make. I make 14 a week. We're not just here to oppose. We're also here to propose. And I like it when you implement some things. And so isn't this a valuable enough reason to right away begin bilateral discussions with India, whether it be going through diplomatic channels or having meetings with your Indian counterpart, perhaps ask for some sort of reciprocity with regards to these firms, consultant firms that are dealing with students who want to study in Canada that have to have some sort of certification by IRCC, even if they are in India. This is a suggestion. So at some point we can't just say, okay, we're reacting, and we have to work to try to fix things ahead of time. Do you think this is a good suggestion? Thank you for your intervention.
Points. One of the things that I've come to understand in this particular job is that there are many issues that I think we need to reform over time, and the International Student Program is a great example. We actually just completed the consultation on a review of the International Student Program not much more than a week ago. But to your point about working with India, we actually had an initiative that we were working on in March of this year for the purpose of sharing good information, strengthening the integrity, and highlighting the extraordinary opportunity we have to continue to recruit students from that particular country. As we go forward, we're actually looking at some new ideas to build a trusted institutions model with some of our post-secondary education partners who demonstrate that they have the capacity to monitor the integrity of applications, to treat students well when they arrive, and to help them adjust to life in the workforce. I think this is the next frontier for the International Student Program, and if you have advice, as always, it would be more than welcome.
Time is up, Mr. Brunel Desep. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you. It sounds to me like that the minister is suggesting the students should go through a dual process through the federal court if they embarked in that process, but as well as this other process. It just seems to me that is a duplication of effort here, if that's the case, and there's limited resources on all fronts. I will further clarify with officials and the minister at a subsequent meeting on this, because this is a critical point that I'm already getting emails from students saying, what do we do now, and how should this proceed? But a critical question here is this also. When will the new task force start its work? What is the start date?
It's already underway. The process has begun, and just for the sake of clarity on the duality of the processes you described, one of the reasons we had to launch a new process is the existing remedies may not be available or the remedies we wish to issue may not be available. If someone today makes a misrepresentation, innocent, negligent, or malicious, they may still be deported from Canada under the existing rules. The new process will help us overcome that.
So then on that basis, for the impacted students, should they not actually embark on that process and undergo this new task force? Because you have CBSA also looking into the situation, you have IRCC looking into the situation, you have the federal court looking into the situation, you have the IRB looking into the situation. We have limited resources here. If the minister is establishing a special task force, all that will be housed in one place. So these cohort of 57 students that have been identified and been impacted, they should go through this new process. Wouldn't that be the proper way of proceeding and the more efficient way of proceeding?
I appreciate the perspective. The process that we've developed is only for people who are inadmissible to Canada and are facing a removal. The IRB process exists to determine whether a person is inadmissible or be removed. I won't offer advice on whether a person should or should not make a challenge in federal court. That is for somebody to be making a decision on their own on the basis of legal advice that they may take. But this provides a remedy for those who've gone through a process that did not have the ability to offer the same remedy.
No, I understand that, but Minister, you've indicated there are 57 students who's been identified and have been issued removal orders. They may not have gone through the federal court, they may have filed and have not been heard just yet, but for those who's received the removal order, should they not then embark on this new process under the task force?
Well, if you've received a removal order, it would be because you have gone through the IRB process and have been found inadmissible. So if you've received a removal order after that process, yes, you should go through this process. The federal court is separate. But I would say as well, the existing process can do a better job of investigating criminality, and we do believe that there's significant criminality with some of the applicants who may find themselves in this position. IRCC in this new process about the status a person may have in Canada is not expert or built to make that kind of an assessment.
Thank you. Time is up for Ms. Kwan. We will now proceed to Mr. Reddycop for 5 minutes, and then we will end the first round with Ms. Sauta for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Minister, for being here. I just want to start with, you were speaking with Mr. Hillan about the fraudulent investigations, fraudulent actors, and could you please table the information that your department has found on that investigation, please?
What information are you asking me to table?
You said you had a department that was investigating fraudulent students and consultants, and you had obtained some results just at the end of Mr. Hillan's conversation last time. I'm just wondering if...
Sure. So, look, it would be helpful if you clarified with specificity now or after the meeting. One of the things that I will flag, to the extent that CBSA is looking at an ongoing investigation into fraudulent activity, we obviously won't share information publicly that could compromise an investigation. But would it be possible to work through the chair to understand which specific information you're looking for?
Well, maybe let's back up. Have you done any investigating? Like, we've talked today about the students and that it's very important that we deal with them. The other issue is preventing this from happening again. So have you investigated and have you initiated investigations to stop that from happening again?
Yes. Sorry. Look, my deputy, I think, would like to chime in. We're feeding each other numbers, but I don't want to speak over her.
I think it's just important to know that there's kind of this particular investigation was launched by the CBSA as a result of a tip. But the department actually has ongoing investigations all the time. So right now, at this particular time, there's over 100 investigations through the various lines of business.
Thank you. So on this particular issue then, Minister, when did you begin the investigation on this?
Do you have the precise date after we received the tip?
Yeah.
So after your tweet around there?
No, I think it was prior to that. The CBSA can say exactly when, but just to give you a sense of scale, Madam Chair, if I may.
If you could table that would be helpful.
Okay.
That would be great to do that.
Okay.
Now, the process was focused on finding these fraudulent students or the fraudulent consultants. Was that the basis of the investigation? And did you find other fraudulent consultants in that process?
So I think the investigation actually would have begun a number of years ago, but there are many investigations that are always going on within in the department. This particular one involved a main group. There may be others who are tied to this, and including people who have a presence in countries outside of India. But with respect to the people who may be involved, it could include all of the potential applicants who may or may not have known about the fraud. So when you're saying what other fraudsters or bad actors have we discovered, there could be quite a significant range of people depending on how broad a definition you took to bad actor.
So it seems like the problem, the failure here was that there was a bad actor who had provided fake letters, and yet the department did not recognize that early and was unable to identify that in other cases. Does the department then, once they find a bad actor, do they go to the other cases? Why didn't these students know that? How come that wasn't found?
So we launched a new approach in 2018 to strengthen the verification of letters of acceptance, but we focused on the letters that we had a reason to believe were not authentic. If there was no reason, given the fact that we deal with many hundreds of thousands of applications in a given year, it would completely erode the ability of the department to productively and efficiently process student applications if we did an investigation into every letter of acceptance that was provided. I think to your earlier question that you started to go down this road, going forward, we need to find a way to use new technology to better verify larger numbers of applications more quickly. Sorry, you're trying to chime in, Mr. Redikoff.
So I guess what I'm really asking on this is was there one consultant that dealt with all of these students, or was there multiple consultants?
No, there were multiple.
Okay. And so you talk about 2018. I think if I understand this, you had a manual process up to that point, and then it became automated. Yet that's when we started to have problems. Am I understanding that right? Or
not quite. Would you like to describe the initiative that we launched in 2018?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I was just kind of curious about that. So I guess one thing I want to point out, just to remind the committee, is that 4 times I tried to raise this issue here at the committee. 4 times the Liberals and the NDP voted against investigating this. And my motion did talk about pausing the deportations, investigating the problem, fixing the system, and allowing students to live their lives. So I am glad that you finally took my advice and actually did this. So, and the students, as has been said before, this is going to be a very happy day for them. But I guess the question still remains, there was inaction until there was a lot of newspaper action, a lot of political action. Why did it take so long to get to this point?
So there was not inaction. The reality is it's common for us to have many investigations, hundreds of investigations that are going on at any given point in time that are trying to bust fraudsters who are seeking to abuse Canada's immigration system. With respect to my knowledge of this specific example, which there had been a pre-existing investigation that actually preceded my time as minister in this portfolio, it came to my attention in the spring, and I wanted to satisfy myself, A, of the facts, B, of the potential criminal elements, and then develop solutions given that I came to understand there were likely innocent people who were mixed up in a fraudulent scheme. So with enormous respect, taking a month or 2 to sort out a complicated problem I think is reasonable, but to suggest there was inaction on behalf of the department when there were live investigations going on for a number of years would not be an accurate depiction of what had actually taken place.
Thank you, Minister. We will now end this panel with Ms. Sota for 5 minutes. Ms. Sota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to give some context as well, I know the CPC the Conservatives put forward a motion in this committee as well to say that legislation to take precedence over all other issues in this committee. So the fact that we couldn't get to this issue until now in the committee, I believe, was due to the committee deciding that legislation clause by clause that we were going through was very important. Some other things, I want to say thank you, Minister, for listening carefully, coming up with a solution that is balanced approach, because we were hearing some unbalanced ideas, like the NDP saying that blanket PRs should be given to everyone, and the Conservatives saying that quick decisions should be made in haste, where I do believe you would not be able to accurately distinguish the good actors from the bad actors, and we do want to do that because we want to keep our immigration system as integrity, and I think this solution will get us there. The other thing, I've been working on many different student issues for many years. I've also written to the ministers provincially responsible for schools in the various provinces, and particularly I've written to the one in Ontario. We're seeing a growing problem in Ontario with many new colleges popping up that I've never heard of, that don't have adequate space or teaching facilities, that are taking in large numbers of students. And our federal government has to comply by these DLI, designated learning institution lists, that are provided by the province. I wanted to know if you had any comments that you could make as to the responsibility that the provinces also have in fixing this greater or larger problem that we're beginning to see.
Look, if you'll allow me, I think the two issues that you mentioned, sort of coming to ground on this issue and the broader issue around DLIs, both speak to the need for cooperation. I think what we've identified through this process, as you know, we've had phone calls, we've had emails, we've had messages back and forth about this particular issue, as I've had with members of different parties. And I find when we take these ideas from different sources, we can identify what the real issues are. And I think it's led to a workable solution that's going to help protect people who deserve protection in this instance and hold those accountable who seek to abuse the system. I think the same is true with designated learning institutions. I think we need to do a better job, not just as a government, but as a society, of working across levels of government and with institutions to better monitor the system. The reality is, at risk of getting ahead of myself, given where we are from a policy perspective today, I've heard a lot of stories that really, really trouble me about designated learning institutes. The vast majority are good actors, make no mistake. But when I hear stories of students who come to this country who tell me they feel like they were sold a false bill of goods and are enrolled in a program that may have 1,000 students with room in the facility for a few dozen students, it suggests to me that there are international students being exploited in this country. Look at the number of students who are attending brand new institutions that have popped up who have inadequate mental health and housing supports. I hear stories about people who are being promised a pathway to permanent residency that does not exist for them. I hear promises that are being made to international students who say, you can come through the student program, but really, you know, you just want to work in this country. That is not what the program is about. We need to work very carefully with institutions so people know what they are getting themselves into and applying for the appropriate programs. We need to work with provincial governments who are responsible for identifying DLIs who have access to the program to ensure that they're willing to hold accountable the institutions that are not treating students fairly, but are instead seeking to profit off them as individuals and not caring whether they are exploited or set up for success. The vast majority of institutions are good players, and we're working towards developing a trusted partner model with institutions that we know are good actors, that have a strong history of working with students and respecting them. The International Student Program is contributing in excess of $22 billion annually to this country. If it's giving that much to us, and forget for the moment that aside from the economics, the social benefit we derive is enormous. If students are making that contribution to us, I think we owe it to them to be honest with them about what they're getting themselves into and not exploit them and set them up for success. It turns out making that happen can be challenging, but it's an effort worth making.
Short follow-up to that really is that I have heard from students that the reason I believe that the provinces are also, have it within their power to fix the system is that I'm hearing from them, although that we've created a system that students can apply for themselves, some of these colleges are acting in collusion with agents abroad that recruit students, and the only way they accept these students is if you apply through their agent. So the student never has the capability of calling the school or finding out directly from the school whether they've even been accepted or not. The school's response at times has been, talk to your agent, which shouldn't be the case.
Look, to the extent that there are examples that you can provide to our office, please know that we will task the department to investigate them. And to the extent that institutions are found to, in a systemic way, be bad actors, they should be shut down. This is not okay. We need to address this head on. The challenge that we face is that it's not just the federal government that holds all the policy levers. We need to work with institutions, we need to work with provincial governments, and to the extent that parliamentarians can shine a light on bad actors who seek to abuse the system, you would be doing a service to your community and to your country, and I would appreciate to partner with you any day that you wish.
Thank you. Our first panel comes to an end. On behalf of all the members of this committee, I would really like to thank you, Minister, for coming and discussing about a very important issue. So we will suspend the meeting for 2 minutes so that you can leave, and we will allow him to leave, and then we will go into round of questioning with the two officials.
Thank you,
Minister.
Merci tout le monde. J'apprécie l'opportunité.
Thank you.
Is it standard?
have Ms. Fox and Ms. Kingsley with us, so we will go directly into the round of questioning, and we will start this with Mr. Kimmich for 6 minutes. Mr. Kimmich, you can please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question is going to be on the DLI specifically. Can you tell me this 2018 system that was introduced, there has to be a method for tracking like fake admission letters. So how does the system work right now? I submit an application, I have a fake admission letter, I don't know that. What happens?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I think what I would say is that the 2018 process is something that we need to build on and move forward on, because the 2018 process was very much about kind of a center of expertise. If an officer or an agent in a mission was reviewing a case, they would send it to this group to see, I suspect that there may be some fraud, and they would use some of the tools that we have to assess whether or not. So it was kind of a support. I think where we need to go, and I think this is where the department is moving to, is an actual data sharing agreement between institutions, DLIs, and the department, so that we have.
You don't have that right now?
We do not have that right now.
So every letter, because I have some of the letters on my tablet here,
yes,
and I've looked at them. At least in one case, the birth date is different on the letter from the passport I'm given, from the visa even that's given, and that person still was able to cross the border, and CBSA still let them in, even though there's 3 different birthdays on 3 different ones. So we've heard now was 87 cases. Is it the same visa officer that reviewed them all and issued the study permit, or is it multiple different officers who issued it, or is it a machine?
So I think 87 cases. So I think I don't think I have 87 anywhere. So I think what we started with was originally CBSA started with.
So it's 82.
Yeah, sorry. So 82 referred to the IRB. But I think when we started this process, through the tips and joint investigations and through the investigative work, it was determined there was about 2,000 cases that were kind of suspicious. That then got narrowed down to about 1,400 cases. Then what we looked at was, in those 1,400, how many of them actually were refused? Out of those, and I'll give you the precise number, 1,485, 976 applicants were refused because fraud was detected.
So I'm actually asking, on the front end, when the study permit was issued on a fake acceptance letter, I want to know whether it was an individual visa officer who made the repeat mistake, or was multiple officers making mistakes?
It would not have been one officer. It was the fraud occurred through multiple officers.
This 2018 system doesn't sound very promising then, because then it leads me to the next question is, my understanding was in the previous system, you would have, if you're changing your place of studying, you would file with IRCC, by the way, here's a different college that I'm going to. So they would do that. I understand many of these students told me they did that. Where did that information go? Yeah,
we absolutely gathered that information, and we do work very closely with DLIs on looking at sort of what is the compliance regime, what are they seeing, how are they submitting documentation to us. So there's a flow of information that happens between the individual applicant, the department, and the DLIs. What we're saying is I think we need to use technology to have real-time information flow between DLIs.
So the department gets the update. So let's say within the first 30 days after someone lands here in Canada to study and they changed their college, do you have data on how often did it happen that somebody changed their college? Well, wouldn't that be a source or a starting point to verify whether, in fact, they perhaps had a real admission letter, a fake admission letter, maybe contact them proactively? Do you have that data?
Yes, we would have. If somebody submits a change of an institution, we would have that data, yes.
So how often did it happen within 30 days after a person landed here on the study permit?
I would have to get back to you on the precise data of exactly how many times that's happened.
That's okay. If you could table that with the committee, that would be incredibly helpful. So in the back and forth with the minister about this 2018 system, the numbers, he used the term widespread criminal element. Who in the IRCC department, the branch, takes care of looking after, because this is terms he used at this committee, widespread criminal element on this study permit, these fake acceptance letter issue. So who in the department and the branch takes care of investigating this? And when did they start investigations?
So I would say that IRCC conducts administrative investigations. And as the minister noted, there's over 100 administrative investigations. However, we definitely work with the CBSA and in some contexts the RCMP to refer the investigations to them should it warrant additional intervention from either the CBSA or the RCMP.
So you mentioned a tip-off. you said it was a CBSA tip-off. When did that tip-off happen?
Well, I think the original investigation from CBSA on a number of cases started back in 2018, and they've been reviewing that, and I understand they will be here at the committee on Monday to speak to it, but I think that the first tip-off was around 2018.
2018, do you know what time in 2018? Is this after the new system was introduced?
So I'm speaking about an IRCC system. CBSA would need to speak to kind of whatever investigation that they undertook.
I'm just asking about timelines. Did the tip-off happen after the new system was introduced, or just calendar year 2018?
I know of calendar year 2018.
Okay. So I guess then my next question will be, we heard from the minister saying there's multiple consultants were involved in these fraudulent schemes that defrauded these victims. These consultants, are they all in Canada, or are they also in the Punjab? Where are they located? Do we know?
I think it's important to note that, and Madam Chair, thank you for the question. I think it is important to note that we, on an ongoing basis, look at the activities around the world. There are fraudulent actors everywhere. People are trying to take advantage of Canada's immigration system. In this context, it was not limited to one country. It was limited to, I think it was around 3 countries that were involved. But what I would say is we always have to undertake fraudulent reviews. We have to look at what the department does in the context of not just the international student program, but all of our programs.
Mr. Al-Khouri for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. And welcome to the officials, and thank you for being with us for this important meeting when we're talking about fraud. It's something that has to be dealt with diplomacy and strictness in order to respect the rule of law. With everything that has happened, I'd like to know what responsibility can be considered for institutions that produced the fraudulent document, and are any disciplinary measures that will be implemented against these institutions? All these institutions were involved in the fraud. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I think that what I would say for the institutions is that institutions, colleges, universities, and I did meet during the consultations on the strategic review on immigration. I met with colleges and universities a lot to try to set out a system where there's a regular sharing of information, and so where we can have a system for institutions, trusted institutions. From IRCC's perspective, we have to respond to demand. It is necessary to have international students, but on the institution side, working with the provinces and territories, perhaps there would be some requirements. Might it be to use tuition to invest in the student, either mental health services or employment services? Institutions should also work with us and share information. And also, we could ask them, what is the integrity system within the institution itself? What consultants are you working with? And are these legitimate consultants? And if the institutions are able to meet the criteria, we could then create a specific relationship. So I think that all the actors in the system have, it's in all of their best interest to work together to combat fraud. Many institutions, well, sometimes they don't know that the offer letter is in the system, that somebody is going to produce a fraudulent document from the college or the university. And bad actors in the system, if they're not able to meet the criteria, well, then on our side, perhaps we could have a different system. I think it's important to note that last year we had over 730,000 applications for international students, new requests or requests for extensions. So given the volume, we have to have a way to protect these students when they come here to Canada. And the last thing I'd like to say is, as an organization, we have to try to clearly communicate in order to try to reduce this dependency on foreign consultants by having better client services from the department side. So if I understand correctly, there will be disciplinary measures against institutions that are not respecting the conditions. Is this what I'm understanding? Essentially, yes, the college does have measures for universities or consultants, or rather consultants that aren't following the rules. What I would say is that the largest consequence is to refuse. So if they don't meet the criteria, students won't necessarily have access to the college or the university. So I think that that is a way of having a system of trust with those who are able to participate and meet the requirements. Have you analyzed or assessed the impact of the situation on foreign students that want to come to Canada? Will they feel safe afterwards? What signal can we send out to foreign students? I think that it's very important, and the department does communicate throughout different countries that speaks of the benefits of coming to study in Canada. As a country, it's to our benefit. I think that the message is that we need a system that limits fraud, and I hope that through this process, they will see that the department and the government is ensuring that students who were here to study will not be penalized, and that we do have a system that puts everything in context. I think this is a message that can be sent. With the review, with the work that we're doing in order to inspire trust, we hope that it will encourage applications, and that we'll be able to maintain Canada as a choice, a destination for students. What about foreign students who want to come here to study in Canada? Is the number going up or down after this situation? Well, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but what I would say is that last year, as I mentioned, we had 737,000 requests. From January to April already, we have 248,000 requests, and this compares with 170,000 last year during the same period. So the demand is still there. Do I have any time left? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. El-Khoury. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desepp for 6 minutes. Mr. Brunel Desepp.
Thank you. And thank you very much for being here with us. I think it's so important what we're talking about today. You said that we needed to work together, and I 100% agree. Do you receive information when people who are making complaints to the consultants? Do you receive complaints directly? Do you receive information when the College of Immigration Consultants receives complaints? Yes. How many complaints in the past year? I don't have the numbers with me. Could we obtain them? Yes, I will provide that. Do you know how many complaints since 2019? No? When you're working together, I think that especially when we prepare for a committee such as this, I think it's important to obtain this type of information. What is the management of these complaints? Who investigates complaints when there's a complaint made to the College of Immigration Consultants? The college has its own process. Yes, so at the department, we manage investigations that are held within the department. So we have a dedicated team, and on our side, we also do investigate, and right now, we have about 119 investigations underway in different fields. Thank you. I might have another question. You remember what the government responded following the report with regards to unfairness, with regards to Francophone students? You responded to the report, and in the response, your department admitted that there was racism within IRCC when it came time to analyze some applications. And so the refusal rate was biased due to this racism. do you make sure that IRCC agents and the CBSA are not going to use the same prejudices as we could have had in the African students file, for example? Are there specific guidelines to determine fraud, or if there was a risk for foreign students linked to racism, could this not be the case in cases of fraud as well? I'm trying to make sure I understand. So we're trying to determine here to see if fraud is linked to the fact that the person might have prejudices. Yes, if it's happened in the case of refusing foreign students from Africa, could it not be the case if someone is analyzing to determine if there was fraud or not? What I would say is that essentially, and thank you for your question, we do have training for all our agents who make decisions on visas. And I think that what the department realized is that perhaps there were some practices that were problematic in the past and needed to be readjusted. And when it comes to Francophone countries in Africa, there were issues. And in part because some parts of the legislation, well, will the person leave after their permit, and financial details that someone has to demonstrate before being accepted. In my opinion, perhaps this requires a review, because sometimes refusals are attributed to these conditions. And I would say that when it requires a different approach in order to increase rates. And I would say the last thing I would say is oftentimes when we look at these refusal rates, they're presented as an overall percentage. And this should be presented by saying the refusal rate due to fraud, refusal rate for other circumstances. That way people can better understand the reason for the refusal and will give a better understanding. Well, now I'm concerned because you're saying that it should be looked at now, but I was hoping that this process had already begun since you responded. I will be more specific. It's how the data is being presented publicly. So I think it should be right now. Yes, but following the report. Yes, we've begun making changes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, because I was nervous. Okay, so about 2 years ago, an information session was given for MPs to provide information on regulating the type of immigration consultants that existed, and it was to better protect people who use these consultants. And so there was training that was being offered. Do you remember? I know that you weren't on the job at the time, but are you aware that this training was provided? Yes, and some institutions mentioned that, and in Nova Scotia, some said that they used this example to provide information sessions to people in their administration, people who are doing work with consultants. So is this still being offered? Is this training being offered? I think so. Hang on. I'm not aware. It would be really nice to know. Well, I would say that there is information that's being provided with consultants, with clients, with institutions, with foreign missions. No, I'm talking about training with MP office staff. I'll check. Because we're talking about solutions, we're talking about trying to make sure that these types of things don't happen again. I believe that this training, well, I would advise you to offer it again if it's not being offered. Perhaps, Madam Chair, with the system for interviews and the work that we do with MPs' offices, this might be within the framework of these types of discussions. This is a new proposal from the Bloc.
You can please begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to just follow up on the process around the task force. The minister, before he left, said that the process has already started. So does that mean to say that individuals who have received the inadmissibility order from IRCC or CBSA would not have to do anything, and that automatically triggers the process for the task force?
So I think what I would say is that the process that we set out is really about sequencing the decision. And I think, like as the minister said, the CBSA will kind of refer matters to the IRB. And as soon as the IRB makes a determination of inadmissibility, then what we would do is to prevent the removal order, the department would issue a TRP, a temporary permit, in order for the person to stay for the duration of what their study permit was. And during that time, then we will kind of look at the case, work with CBSA. But the reason why we inserted the issuance of the TRP at that moment was to prevent any removals from occurring.
So then the students don't have to do anything? Will they then automatically be notified that a TRV has been issued for them?
That is correct, yes.
And for the students who have a work permit underway, will that be automatically be renewed?
Yes, so they will be able to either continue their study, or continue their work as a result of that.
What about for students whose either work permit or study permit has just expired? So then they might be, because of this situation, be out of status. Would they also be made whole and not be subject to sanctions?
I think what I would say is we'll have to look at that on a case by case, but the TRP would essentially give them their status back, because they would be allowed to stay under the TRP for a duration of up to 3 years.
So they would get implied status?
Yeah.
Kicked in. Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. On the issue around how this happened and why it took so long, one of the issues that actually multiple students have said it to me, that through every step of the process, it was never caught. Not when the application went in, not when they arrived here in Canada. It was not spotted by CBSA. It was not spotted when they applied for a work permit, for example. It was really only in the final step, in many cases where people were applying for permanent resident status, that this then got caught. And so I guess my question is, in terms of the measures to prevent this from happening again, right? Why is it that the government do not do the check on the documents in the front end, and instead is actually doing the check, what appears to me is in the back end?
I think what I would say to that, and thank you for the question, is I think it's important to note that, and this is part of the work of the department, is that in some cases it was, right? Over 900 applications were denied as a result of the fraud through the same stream of investigation. And so why in those cases was the fraud detected and not others? And that is something that we will undertake to review. I would also note that there is, at times, a high level of sophistication, and that's why we need to take a look at what are the tools that we need to improve on. And I think that the data sharing is key. If I know exactly how many letters of offer institution X issues every year, and I compare that against my system, then right then and there at the front end, we can make a determination that we have an issue or that we don't. And these are the types of things that we are working towards with the reform of the international student program. It's not perfect, it's one step, and there's multiple measures that we layer onto that.
Yeah, it'd be difficult even if you know for the year, because it's different stages, right? So if you get the number by the end of the year, let's say, some of them might have already gone through the system. But anyway, I'm sure that you're aware of that, and I don't want to spend limited time here in going through that issue. So are you saying that for every application that comes in, that there is a vetting process already, and then these are the ones that has been missed somehow for some reason?
Yes, every application has been vetted.
Okay. Is it possible, maybe this is a question for CBSA when they come next week, is it possible that some of these, the unscrupulous consultants that's been identified, or at least known to the government at this point, might have been working in collaboration with Canadian actors here who's aiming to be part of the defrauding scam?
I think that is probably best placed with CBSA. I wouldn't want to, dive into that.
All right. In terms of the situation with the students and the families that are impacted, for the students that's already left or deported already, will they be notified that there's this alternate process? How will they know that there's another way to which they can try and prove their innocence?
Yeah, I think for the 8 individuals that have been removed, we will be reviewing each of those cases and notifying them if appropriate. If it was in fact a genuine student that was here, they would be notified, yes.
An automatic triggering process for the 8 that has been removed, does that include of the people who left on their own as well?
So I would start by saying that the 8 will be prioritized to be kind of reviewed now. The task force will undertake that. I think, Michelle, maybe you can speak to the 10.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the 10 who have left voluntarily had not been referred to the IRB, and there was no finding of inadmissibility for them. So they can return. They can reapply to come back to Canada. There's nothing on their file that hints at inadmissibility.
Time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Kimmich for 5 minutes. Mr. Kimmich.
Thank you, Chair. Back to this 2018 system that was introduced. Does this system have a name?
It was just a letter of offer verification system, I think is yeah.
It doesn't have like a corporate name. It's an in-house software system of some sort?
So it's a centralized group of program officers who would review letters of acceptance that were deemed to be suspicious by decision makers. So there wasn't an automated process. It really is if a decision maker abroad was reviewing an application and thought that the letter of acceptance looked suspicious, could be fraudulent, they would refer it to this group, and this group would check the letter of acceptance.
So leads me to the next question, which is, has a notice then been sent to visa officers who are processing these international student applications to tell them, like, the following consultants have made fraudulent applications, have defrauded other international students, so watch out for their applications? Has that been done?
Yes, so all of the patterns that we identify of fraud...
I just mean, has a notice been sent to all visa officers processing international student applications? I'm not asking for the process. Did a notice go out, basically, to watch out for the applications done by the consultants which you know have submitted fraudulent applications?
Anytime that we know that there is a fraudulent actor, there's a pattern of fraud, that does go back out into the networks.
Okay. Have any of the colleges in Canada approached IRCC either at the senior level, like ADMs, DM level, to inform you that they suspected that there were fraudulent applications and fraudulent acceptance letters? These students were going, I have one in one case where they went, they asked for some information from their college, they were told, you're not one of our students. Have the colleges gone to you proactively? Has anyone gone to you proactively?
I mean, fraud is top of mind for all institutions, especially colleges and universities. So it's an ongoing conversation with them in terms of
so did they contact you?
Yes, we have many conversations with them on fraud and other issues.
Can I ask you then about that 2,000 estimate number? How did you arrive at that number?
So I think so the 2000 was essentially, like, I think when CBSA conducted their review based on various tips, they probably, and they can speak to this in more detail, but they probably kind of looked at, okay, who could fall within that sort of area of risk, vulnerability, fraud activity, and then they started narrowing to say, okay, how many cases are actually directly linked to the fraudulent activity, how many of those actually came into the country, and then how many of those are linked to criminal activity, and how many of those are perhaps genuine students. And I think that that's kind of the process by which we work through the various cases.
So I have a question for you. Are you confident you've identified all the potential cases where a fake acceptance letter was given to an international student? Like, when I come back here in 6 months and we'll be told there's another 2,000 and another 2,000, are you confident you've caught all of them?
No. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think it would be, we always undergo activities around fraud, and I think it would be, it would not be appropriate for me to say, this is it, it's contained here. There are systems in the, actors in the system continuously looking at fraudulent activity and unscrupulous actors. And so this is the information. This is how we've narrowed it down. This is where we're at with the investigation at this point. And we will continue to be vigilant.
Are you saying there's a potential there could be other international students out there in Canada who could also be victims of these unscrupulous, malicious consultants?
What I'm saying is that we always need to be vigilant against fraud. Always. In all of our lines of business.
I'll take that as a yes, there is potential then.
always vigilant.
Always vigilant. Okay, you're good at this.
Learn from you guys.
It's for again, back to that 2,000 number. That process of identifying it, was that between the time when the minister found out in March and then his tweet in May, or was that going on at different timelines?
It was different timelines. It occurred prior to that.
How much, like when?
That's the 2018 that I referred to earlier.
So since 2018, there's been an accumulation of cases that have been identified, sent down to this program officers group to deal with, or is it just in general at IRCC 2,000? These are all international students as well?
Sorry, I think just to be clear, the 2,000 is part of the CBSA investigation. The letter of offer verification process and the fraudulent activity that we monitor within the department is at IRCC, and that is an ongoing process. It is a system that exists for any officer around the world who is suspicious about an application, who may be seeing a pattern, whatever that may be. They would have a central place to go to and say, I'm worried about this, something's off, can you kind of work with me? And then that team does that support. And that's very separate from the 2,000.
Time is up for Mr. Kimmich. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 5 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Deputy Minister as well as to the Assistant Deputy to be here. Deputy Minister, I'm going to carry on with Mr. Kimmich's question because that is a very important question from the integrity perspective. Because these scrupulous agents claim that they have inside connections. That is the reason, I will ask you the question, if this was a one officer that processed all those cases, or you are certain that these were processed by different immigration officers?
So what I would say is that there are cases of fraud within the department that have gotten through the screens that have gone through, and that we constantly look at what were the tools and measures in place to prevent it, where is the fraud coming from, where do we see patterns, and of course, if ever there would be an indication that that pattern is kind of within a particular office or individual, then we would definitely look into that. But I would say that, and this is part of the due diligence within the department, but I think it is important that we share that there are sort of different levels of prevention activities that occur. There's communications and advertising campaigns that happen in countries that have a lot of international students that come study to Canada to say, this is what you need to look out for. These are the things that you should expect. And we encourage all international students to actually liaise with the designated learning institution directly. And so there's prevention activities and tools. And then when we kind of look at, okay, we do have, if we have cases of fraud, then there are various things that we do depending on the nature, depending on the scope, depending on the extent. What we are hoping is that to leverage technology to be able to kind of detect that sooner, to have the ability to see patterns and trends in a bit more of a global processing network standpoint. But I would say that fraud occurs in not particular one officer or one location.
Thank you. And what can be done in the long term to better use modernization and technology to detect fraud in more efficient way and avoid it?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I think that in terms of kind of modernized platform, I talked about data information sharing. And I think if there are systems in place where particular ID numbers are given by an institution that we can then match within our systems to a student to make sure that that connection occurs, that would be one example. I think if you can have tools and that are, part of a same platform where you can see if there's a fraudulent activity linked to a similar email address, the name of a consultant firm, a particular college or institution. These are sort of some of the kind of platform modernization pieces that can help detect fraud. I think the introduction of some of these technologies will allow us to be able to not only detect it but communicate it in real time across the world. So I do think that there are systems in place now, but they can be emphasized and more effective with the better use of technology. And I would say the better collaboration, including with provinces and territories who manage and regulate some of the DLIs around the country.
Thank you. As a general rule, what should someone do if they suspect they have been victims of a fraudulent consultant? Is there a way for them to report this and try to get the situation rectified?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that question. So if a student or anyone thinks that they have been subject to, they've been victimized or they have knowledge of fraud, they should report it. If they have been working with a consultant, then reporting that, making a complaint to the College of Consultants, making a complaint to the Bar Association would be appropriate. IRCC has on its website emails and web forms to submit that information to us. The CBSA has a toll-free number, so any knowledge of fraud, we encourage people to report it to us. And if a newcomer has an application with us and they'd like to change that application to remove a consultant, that can also be done.
Deputy Minister, you mentioned bringing in awareness to foreign students who want to come here, and particularly when it comes to India. But more can be done to help those individuals that want to come here, that they are not the victims of fraud in future.
I think what more could be done is, I would say a simplified system so there's not an over-reliance on consultants, and I think that's kind of step one. I think step two would be around clear communications with respect to kind of the processes and kind of how we articulate that. I think the letter of verification that we've talked about is a really important piece, and I think that not only does it protect the kind of Canadian system, the institution, it protects the student as well to make sure that they would know at the front end. I think we have to continue the kind of anti-fraud prevention.
Time is up for Mr. Dhaliwal. If you can just quickly finish the sentence.
I would also say that part of the work of the trusted institutions model is also about the outcomes that the students have after their experience at a college or university and making that public. So when a student makes their choice about which institutions they go to in this country, that they go to legitimate institutions where they see outcomes with, postgraduate work programs or employment outcomes or PR outcomes. And I think those are kind of some of the indications that we can push people towards designated, trusted institutions versus perhaps some of the bad actors that have been created. Merci.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brunel-Desailly for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you. I have two questions that I'd like to ask. At the department, do you have enough resources to deal with this file and the investigation without creating delays in other files? If I understand correctly, this is being given priority, but does it mean that because you don't necessarily have enough resources to meet this demand, other files will be late? Thank you. We were able to dedicate necessary resources without having an impact on other files. We've had increases in our staffing levels, and this has allowed us to create the task force, to do the work for the team, and to continue to make huge progress on processing. So no impact. Yes, and I can confirm that right now we're at 40 days to deal with requests for international students, and the service standards are 60 days. Great. Thank you. Now, what is the calendar looking like for victims, those who were victims of fraud? So what is the timeline? When we will have an idea, when they know exactly what their status is? It's a good question, and I think that the time determination will depend on the case and the review of cases. Some cases might be more complicated than others, but I think that it's in our best interest, especially the 8 that have already left, to make this a priority. And right now, we believe that there will be 300 cases of interest. So we have just begun the work. Perhaps we could come back to the committee. No, it's not really for me, but right now there are students who are watching this and they want to know what's happening and they want to know how long they have to wait. Is it possible to at least give them some sort of parameter, perhaps not extremely specific, but is it months? Is it longer? So that people concerned who are watching will have an idea. Thank you. I think that we could say for students watching right now that we want to do this on a priority basis. It's a question of weeks and not necessarily huge, lengthy processes. And when I say this, it's once the determination has been made at the IRB, then our work begins. I'm talking about the time. Okay, thank you.
Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Ms. Kwan.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think the timeline is really important. What the students want, of course, is the quickest process that they can go through, and then with an outcome that will come out of it, because their lives has already been, sort of turned upside down when they learned about this situation, and people are, stressed to the max, I think. So the quicker we can turn it around, the better. So I'm glad to hear that maybe it's just a matter of weeks before this can all be finalized, and I hope that's the case. I am interested in looking at how to prevent this from happening, and particularly from the ghost consultants. The truth of the matter is the ghost consultants cannot be regulated under Canadian rules because they're from a different country. But we know that they're being prey upon. This was a study that was done in 2017, and it seems like there's nothing much we can do. But I am curious, is there an opportunity for us to work with our counterpart from those different countries to establish a clear set of guidelines, if you will, or expectations, if you will, for these consultants to engage and what they need to provide to the students by way of verifications? So then it becomes a requirement in the minimum that those consultants who practice there, that they have to provide that information to the students so that they can take it upon themselves also to ensure that verification is done at the front end.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I would start by saying that I completely agree with you on the timeliness of this work. I think people's lives, their mental health has had a huge impact. So I completely agree with you. And that's why we will work through this expeditiously. And I think to your second point, we definitely share with our through our bilateral relations, through our missions, through our dialogue with other countries around our expectations in Canada and the process by which we want the international student program to work. I think your idea of a specific guidance, I think, is important. I think we do have a lot of documents, but I will undertake to take a look at it and see how that can be improved, or how we can kind of look at this situation and then apply the lessons to future communications, because I do think that we continuously need to provide that guidance. And I would also note that that's important in bilateral conversation, but it's also important with us directly to students.
I have one last question. For students who...
Sorry, Ms. Kwan, your time is up, so you won't have the opportunity. We will now proceed to Mr. Reddycop for 5 minutes. Mr. Reddycop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. Ms. Fox, you just mentioned 300 cases of interest. Could you expand on what exactly that meant? Is that the 700, the mysterious 700 number that we're talking about?
So I think how I would break it down, so yeah, the 700 is not something that we have validated, but I think what I was saying is I mentioned the kind of 1,485 number. 976 of those were refused. So that would, and some of them kind of had applications in progress or were abandoned, so we've kind of removed those from the equation. And so it looked like about 448 applications were approved. Out of those, some of them have a link to criminality that would not be coming through this process that we've established. So the 300 are those that we feel warrant to come through the task force.
Okay, that makes sense. If I'm an immigration officer abroad and I suspect fraud, what do I do? Do I call the DLI? Do I talk with a consultant? What happens?
So I think you could, I think that as an immigration officer abroad, you would first kind of consult probably your network of colleagues around you in terms of whether or not whatever kind of has sparked your suspicion is something they've seen within kind of the team they work with. I think we've described a process by which there's kind of a centralized team that looks at it from a global perspective. That would be another avenue that we would go to. I think that we do have direct relationships and conversations with colleges and universities, and that could definitely be part of the verification process that an officer takes. So I think there would be sort of multiple ways in which somebody could flag, detect, ask questions about something they see that they don't feel is accurate or seems off.
Okay. Now, the minister said, and you've repeated this as well, that you do work with foreign governments in order to manage immigration consultants, and just you have bilateral talks all the time. First of all, you said that there were 3 countries involved in this original group of 2,000 files that you talked about. What are those 3 countries?
Let me pull it out. So the 3 countries are, well, India, foreign nationals from India, Vietnam, and the People's Republic of China, but are predominantly Indian nationals, and we think about 85% Indian nationals.
Okay. And so have you then had deeper discussions with the government of India about this problem in terms of your bilateral discussions, and are there any results to report from that?
We've had general conversations with the government, but specific to this case, I think that we wanted to get to the heart of kind of where things stood, but I think it will be part of conversations that we have going forward, but we have an ongoing conversation with them around fraud.
So, and I had heard that this particular consultant, I believe his name is Rahul Bhargava, was actually arrested in India. I'm assuming that's true. Was that did Canada have anything to do with that, or was that completely unrelated to what we're talking about today?
Not to my knowledge, but perhaps CBSA will be able to share more on that.
Okay. I guess the kind of the meat of this question is, students that I've talked to are very interested in knowing that these bad actors will be caught and prevented from doing this in the future, because they got caught up in this unknowingly, and they're worried about who's coming behind them and who's going to have the same problem. What assurances can you give them of that these bad actors will be stopped?
I think that what I would say to those students and what I would say to all of you is that we need to continuously look at our programs in a way to have anti-fraud measures built in. And I think there will always be that risk, and it's about managing that risk, and it's about setting up a system that works for both Canada and the students that choose Canada. And I think that the measures I've described and as part of the dialogue that we've had across the country, we have had really good ideas from provinces and territories, from designated learning institutions around what types of models would prevent this. And what I would say to those students is that we're trying to build that model so they can have confidence in coming and studying here.
On DLIs, the minister said that there were problems, that he was concerned about some of them. Is there an investigation into fraudulent practices at DLIs?
I think what I would say is that provinces and territories, and I think some of the jurisdictions around the country have done full-on sort of reviews of their institutions. I think other jurisdictions are doing reviews of the connection between private and public institutions, the growth of private institutions, and that's an ongoing.
So you're saying that's a provincial responsibility, not?
I'm saying it's a joint responsibility.
Okay. And so is there a particular number of schools that you could say are suspicious in Canada that you're investigating?
I would say that we're constantly looking at risks and based on data, where are we seeing fraudulent letters come from? What is the data that we have by institution? We definitely take a look at that very closely.
Thank you. We will now end this panel and today's meeting with Mr. Ali for 5 minutes. Yes, Ms. Kwan.
Chair, before we adjourn the meeting today, I have one item that I would like to raise related to the press release that was issued. So before we adjourn, I would like to speak to that.
Mr. Ali for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank officials for being here today. As you know, earlier today, the department issued a statement by Minister Fraser that a task force of IRCC officials has been established and asked to work closely with CBSA to identify the victims of fraud. That is, those students who came to study here in Canada and did exactly that. Can you expand on how this task force will conduct its work, please?
Yeah, I thank you very much for the question. I think I would say that we have designated 2 assistant deputy ministers. Michelle is one from IRCC, and from CBSA, it will be the Vice President of Intelligence and Enforcement Branch. And so the 2 ADMs will work with their teams in order to prioritize the cases, go through the cases. And I think that Michelle and I meet almost daily, so we will have a process by which myself and Minister Fraser are kept updated on a very regular basis on the progress that we're making on each case and the decisions that we're coming to, so that we can come to a conclusion as quickly as possible for the decision making and to inform those involved. And I think we've put together a bit of a process on how it's going to unfold. And I think we're both very aware, both organizations, of the importance of doing this work as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. A follow-up on this. Do you have any time frame for this process to deal with this particular issue of the international students?
Yeah, I think we are trying to do this as quickly as we possibly can. So we're talking a matter of weeks. Obviously, we're going to work, very quickly once the IRB makes their determination. If it is a determination of inadmissibility, the department will issue a TRP, a temporary resident permit, right away. And that's an important sequence of decision because it prevents the removal and therefore allows us time to go through the case, look at it on a case-by-case basis, and then make our final decision.
Great, thank you. And today's statement went on to say that if the facts of an individual case are clear, then an international student came to Canada with a genuine intent to study and without knowledge of the use of a fraudulent documentation, a temporary resident permit will be issued to that individual. This will ensure that these well-intentioned students and graduates can remain in Canada and ensure that they are not subject to the 5 years ban from re-entering Canada that normally follows in cases of misrepresentation. While this process runs its course, preliminary temporary resident permit will be issued if they are required in order to prevent an imminent deportation. What is the department planning to do so that this situation is avoided in the future? This situation is avoided in the future.
I do think that this is something that we need to take a look at, kind of what circumstances made it such that some permits were approved while others weren't, and were refused on the basis of fraud. And so looking at the decision-making process and the tools that are in place, I think that will help inform the work going forward. I think that even prior to this, we are aware that there are often actors attempting to commit fraud within the immigration system. And so how we improve through our communications, through our processes, is something that we will learn. And I think at the end of the review of the 300 cases, I think that we will have to take a look at what did we hear from the exchanges with the students themselves in the process that we have followed to better appreciate and understand. And I think that the time that you have taken to spend with those students and that we have taken and will take is really important, because that's how we get to the source of why they made particular choices at a particular time, what type of connection they had with these bad actors, and how we can help that in helping us inform our future work with potential students around the world.
Thank you again, through Madam Chair. As a general rule, what should someone do if they suspect they have been victims of a fraudulent consultant? Is there a way for them to report this and try to get the situation rectified?
Absolutely.
Rectified, yes.
Thank you for the question. And Madam Chair, I think what I would say is that we always encourage people to report, to come forward and speak to IRCC, to speak to CBSA. I think the vulnerability of the circumstances in which someone could find themselves in if they are victims of fraud, I think the sooner they advise us, the sooner we can take action, and the sooner we can also support if required. So I think I would say I would encourage people to contact us and let us know immediately.
Great.
Mr. Ali, your time is up, yes?
Just quick on follow-up on this, 30 seconds. You took 1 minute extra, man.
With that, I really want to thank Ms. Fox and Ms. Kingsley for appearing before the committee today. Thank you for all the work which you do. So, yes, Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This afternoon, late morning, I guess, we received the press release that was sent out from the clerk regarding the motion that was passed on June 7th. The motion was very specific to call on the government to condemn the actions of these fraudulent ghost consultants and call on CBSA to immediately stay pending deportations of affected international students, waive inadmissibility on the basis of misrepresentation, and provide an alternate pathway to permanent status for those impacted, such as the humanitarian and compassionate application process or a broad regularization program. That is the specific language that was passed for this motion. The press release was editorialized in terms of that language. It definitely is not a reflection of the motion that was passed. I remember this distinctively because there was an amendment that was tried to eliminate the word of alternate pathway. And that does not even show up in the press release. I don't think that is actually a very cool thing to do. Instructions were given by this committee where we voted unanimously on the language that was passed. But the press release does not reflect that. So I am very perturbed by this. I'm very unhappy by that. And I don't think this is an honest approach. And I'm just dismayed. In the past, where press releases were issued, they took the language of the motion that was passed specifically, and it didn't this time. And this draft, there was never a draft that was sent to committee members for review before it went out.
Look on that, and I will.
No, it doesn't matter. Sorry, if I may finish. It doesn't matter that nobody got it. Everyone should have gotten it. And what I'm saying is this: the press release should have reflected the language of the motion, and it doesn't.
I'll look into that. Just one thing before we adjourn the meeting. Yes, Mr. Reddycop.
Just, I won't take a lot of time, but I fully agree with Ms. Kwan on that. Thank you.
Thank you. One item.
This is not how we do business.
Okay,
here.
just 1 second order. Just one item. I need to get the earlier today the clerk distributed a draft budget for our new study. So is there a motion to adopt that budget? I have silence, please, from both sides, please. All the questions should be directed through the chairs. No conversations across the aisles. So please, I want to, is there a motion to adopt the budget which was circulated by the clerk? Yes. Okay. All in favor? Yes. Okay. So our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 19th, and the notice will be published in the coming days. Thank you. With that, the meeting is adjourned.